What's going on? Welcome to the next module of Persuasion Hacks. And today we are going to talk about rapport. And before we get started, man, I'm going to tell you guys a story. So back when I was a teenager, I moved from one middle school to the other. And then, I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody. And one day, I walk up to this kid at the lunch line, and he was friends with some of the kids that I had recently met and became friends with, but he didn't really know me yet. Um, and so he was hooking them all up with free pizzas, just because they were friends, and he had some plug in the school cafeteria, so he was giving all these guys free pizzas. And then when I walk up there and I order a pizza, I was planning on paying anyway, but he's like, "All right, well it's gonna be $3. You ain't getting it for free." And I didn't know this guy, and I'm just looking at him like, "Yeah, I was gonna pay for it. What you talking about, man?" And he's like, "All right, I just want to let you know that you got to pay." And I'm like, "All right, motherfucker." Right? So, like it was just a weird interaction. And then a few weeks later, one of the kids that I had met in my neighborhood, we were hanging out, and he's like, "Yeah, hey, let's ride up to my buddy Steve's house, and I'll introduce you." And so we get on our bikes and we ride up to Steve's house, and I didn't have it. I didn't have any expectations. I was like, "All right, cool, we're gonna meet some other kid." So we roll up there, and it's the same kid that was in the middle of the lunchroom selling pizzas and freaking, was like being a dick. And so when we first met, I'm like, this guy, you know what I mean? But then what ended up happening is over the course of time, we all lived in the same neighborhood. We ended up hanging out and everything. And for a while, Steve became one of my best friends. For like a couple years, him and I were best friends pretty much. And so what made us go from you know, having this weird interaction where if there wasn't a glass between us, I probably would have whooped his ass, to us becoming best friends? Well, it was rapport. It was rapport. And when I talk about rapport, I want you to think about it as like radio waves, right? Frequencies, okay? So if you look at this picture here, each of these lines is a frequency, right? And they get bigger and wider, right? And so Nikola Tesla said, if you think of the world in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, you'll have it all figured out, right? So say each of these lines here, every one of these lines represent energy, right? And then they get bigger because they're vibrating at different frequencies, right? And then vibration is like, are they buzzing super fast, or are they more of a slow, you know what I mean? So if you think of relationships like that, then it'll help you understand this a little bit more. So everybody is vibrating at a certain frequency, right? And this isn't like a hypothetical thing. We're all energy, right? We're all atoms that are moving very fast, and that's what make us matter, right? Physical matter. So without getting too complicated into this, if you're on this line and I'm on this line, we're at a sync, right? We're on different frequencies. So how can we get on the same frequency? Well, either you got to bring me to the same level as you here, or I got to bring you to the same level as me here, right? And then we're on the same frequency. And so rapport is a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. Understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. And so at the end of the day, rapport is really what this says at the end. Being able to understand each other's feelings or ideas and being able to communicate well, right? It's harmonious, it's in harmony, it's in sync. And so knowing what rapport is, it is extremely important for you to be in rapport with someone in order to persuade them, right? If you're out of rapport, like if you're here and I'm here, we're not going to be speaking the same language. It's not going to be easy for us to communicate well. It's going to be difficult for us to communicate well. And there's a lot of factors that go into this, right? There's different personality types, there's speaking types, right? Some people speak like me. Like there's people from New York that everything they say is like this. And man, I went to the store the other day and the freaking guy didn't have the cheesecake, so I almost whooped his ass. And then I went over and got the pizza, and the pizza was so delicious. Right? They're moving a million miles an hour. And then on the flip side, you got folks from Arkansas, and they talk much more like this. And why do those people from New York talk so dang fast? Can't even understand what they're saying. So can you see how those two people being on different frequencies, right, being out of rapport, will have a hard time communicating well and understanding each other's feelings or ideas, right? And that's how everything's split. That's why you have the liberals and the conservatives, right? That's why you have the rich and the poor, or whatever, the rich mindset and the poor mindset. That's where people get out of rapport. So the thing is, your job has to be to develop rapport with everyone that you want to persuade. And so how can you do that? Well, there's a couple ways to gain rapport. Number one is called mirroring. All right, and so there was this old psychologist or psychiatric whatever guy named Milton Erickson, and Milton Erickson, he had polio when he was a kid, and he was stuck in his bed. He couldn't move. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't even like move his hands or anything like that. And so all he would do was sit there, and he couldn't speak. He couldn't do anything, right? So he would sit there and just pay attention. And he had these sisters, and when his sisters would talk, he would notice how their facial expressions would change, and how what they were saying with their mouth didn't actually always align with what they were saying with their faces. And so he became like obsessed with this, of how like the mind and the face and the body communicates and all this stuff. And so he was sitting there one day, and he said to himself in his mind, how about if I can use the power of my mind to heal my body? And so over the course of the next few months, he was just focusing on his hand, trying to see if he can get his finger to move. And for months and months and months, he was just doing this, focusing all of his attention, all of his energy, all his power on just getting a little movement out of his finger. And one day it happened, right? And after that, he adopted the belief that he can change this. So he ended up being able to move his body, being able to speak again. He basically healed himself through the power of his mind. And he continued to go on studying people, and he was known as like one of the greatest psychologists of all time, or psychiatric, people of all time. And what he did is he developed this technique that he called matching and mirroring. So if someone came in to his office and they were like in a rage, man, I don't know why the hell I'm here. These guys just want me to come here. Freaking, you're not going to be able to help me, man. I've already talked to 50 million different people. Well, then he would match their energy, right? He would get on the same frequency. So he would be like, man, you know what? You're right. You freaking tried everybody, but this is your last chance. So if you better either come and sit down or get your ass out, right? And he would match their energy. And these people would be like, oh, okay, cool. You know what I mean? They would be like, I like this guy. I get this guy. And so how can you mirror, right? How can you mirror? Well, mirroring, there's a couple different ways, right? There's the physical, right? So if people are, and you got to be careful with this. You don't want to overuse it, right? But there's ways to mirror people, like their movements, or if someone has a gesture, like there's people have certain types of gestures. Maybe it's something with their hand. Maybe it's something like where they make a fist. Maybe it's like the way that their eyebrows crunch up when they say something that they're passionate about, or when they're really trying to make an emphasis on something. So if you mirror those things, their subconscious mind will connect with you. I'm not saying that you got to sit there and like they cross their arms, you cross their arms. They touch their head, you touch their head. They squint their eyes, you squint your eyes. No, it's not that. You're looking for powerful subconscious signals that people give that you can mirror when you're making points of emphasis. So if every time someone says yeah, they kind of like do that little emphasis with their voice, yeah. Well, then maybe next time you have the opportunity to say, yeah, you kind of model it. Yeah. So I met this guy at Barnes and Noble one day, and he was a business owner, and we were sitting there talking, and he kept saying, like, what was the word that he kept saying? Um, he kept saying wicked, right? He kept saying wicked. And so I would say something, and instead of being like cool or awesome, he'd be like, "Yeah, wicked, man, that's wicked." And so I remember towards the end, I just a couple times I was like, "Yeah, man, that's pretty wicked." Just using his same language and feeding it back to him. And by the end, he's like, "Yo, man, we definitely got to do business together. You're a really cool guy." Da 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 da. And I was just mirroring, right? And so there's a couple things that you can do in mirroring. So there's the physical aspect. There's the speech aspect, right? So if someone's talking slow, then calm down and slow your speech down. If someone's talking fast, then match their energy because they're not going to wait for you to finish your slow statement, right? So you got to match people where they are. The other thing that you can do is called echoing, and this is also part of this mirroring technique. Echoing is when you use the same words as the other person. So an example of that is like the guy that was using wicked, right? What does wicked mean in his mind? It's the same thing as cool or awesome or rad or tubular or dope or fire or lit, right? They're all versions of the same thing, but what's the language that person is using? So if you're talking to someone and they're like, "Man, that was lit, bro. Yeah, man, that was super dope. Man, that was lit." Well, then when you're referring to something that's cool, maybe you mirror their words. "Yeah, man, that was lit. I would agree with you. That was dope." You know what I'm saying? So that's echoing, right? And you can echo like the way people describe stuff. So if someone was like, "Man, that is like weird looking," you don't want to reframe it and say, "Oh, you mean it's ugly?" Or, "Yeah, it's kind of ugly." No, you say, "Yeah, it is kind of weird looking," right? You're using their language, giving their language back to them. That's called mirroring, right? But what happens if you're trying to sell like I am via a video or via different methods where people aren't in front of you, where you can't see them, where you can't mirror them? Well, then the other way to gain rapport is through story, right? Through story. So at the beginning of any story, you want to tell your backstory, which gives the person you're speaking to a vested interest in what it is that you have to say. So, for example, when you first purchase this, you're most likely an entrepreneur or a salesperson who has a product or service to sell, and you want to make more money, and you want to be better at selling, and you want to be better at creating offers. That's if you're in this course, that probably describes you pretty well, right? And so in my backstory, I mentioned how I was a salesperson, got tired of the corporate world. I mentioned how I started my business and was barely making any money and could barely sell these $200 packages, and that gives you the listener a vested interest in my story, which builds rapport, right? And so how can you use this in your business to increase sales, to persuade more people, to make more money, to do all the things that you want to do? Well, very simple. If you're selling in person, start understanding what this person is communicating, how they're communicating, what they're doing with their body, what they're doing with their voice, what they're doing with their facial gestures, and start mirroring them so you get into a sense of rapport. You get in, remember we talked about the frequency? You can get in alignment on the same frequency, right? So that's the first thing. And then if you're not, even when you're in person, you can still definitely tell stories to gain rapport. But if you're not in person, if you're selling to the masses, or if you're selling via video or events or whatever, then use story as that method of getting rapport, right? Because we all have similar wants and need, right? We all have, Tony Robbins calls them the 6 human needs. There's certainty. We want to have certainty and security, right? We want to know how things are going to go a certain way. But if we had only certainty, then life would be boring. So we have a need for fun and adventure, right? For uncertainty. The next need that we have is for significance, right? We want to feel important. We want to feel like we're special. And then beyond significance is love and connection, right? We want to feel connected to other people. We want to feel like we're part of the group. We're part of the society, right? Then those are the four basic human needs, and then there's two that he calls the spiritual needs. One is growth. If we don't feel like we're growing, then we're dying, right? So growth, and then the last one is contribution. We want to feel like we're contributing, like we're making a difference in the world. And so knowing that when you tell your stories, everybody has these same needs, right? So you kind of like use the needs as the way to relate to people. So like, yeah, man, I just wanted to be able to have stable income. What is that? Certainty. But I was so tired of like going to work every day doing something that I hated and feeling like I was selling out. What is that? Uncertainty, right? And I really wanted to help people and make a difference in people's lives. What's that? Contribution. And I wanted to just really feel like I could do it. You know what I'm saying? What is that? Significance, right? Can you see how you can use these to connect and gain rapport with anybody? I'll finish this lesson off by telling you a story. So that same buddy that I talked about in the beginning, one time he invited me out to California to that we were going to visit his grandma, and we went out there and we stayed there for a couple days, and then the last few days, his mom called and was like, "Hey, can you guys come stay with us? I haven't seen you in a while." So we went over and stayed with his mom, and here's the thing: his mom's husband was a white supremacist, like legit Nazi tattoo on his back. Straight up white supremacist. I know he was married to a Mexican woman, which is something that I've seen a lot of white supremacist men do. I think it's a power thing, but that's besides the point. He was married to my buddy's mom, and this dude was straight up Nazi skinhead, walking around looking like Stone Cold Steve Austin, but skinnier, right? And when I first got to the house, I could feel the freaking intensity, like the animosity, right? Just the pre-built, pre-framed animosity. And so for the first few days, like the first day and a half we were there, the dude didn't say anything to me. And then on that second day, that night, we started getting into a conversation, and we started talking about things, and we started discussing stuff, and we discussed race a little bit, but then we discussed other things. And by the end of the conversation, we were talking about the things that we relate on, like just being human beings, being men, like women, all the things that everybody has in common. And by the end of it, when I left, this guy was like, "Yo, man, you're one of the coolest people I've ever met. Black, white, Mexican, it don't even matter." He's like, "You're just super cool, man, and I wish you the best." Da 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 da. And so we went from a place of like this pre-framed hatred into him telling me like, "I'm one of the coolest people you've ever met." How does that happen? It's through the secret of rapport. So you got to understand that this is one of the most powerful things you can use to persuade people, because you're speaking their language, you're getting in sync with them, you're on the same frequency. If you've ever met someone that just has like a personal magnetism, something that attracts people to them, that everyone likes, they call it charisma. That's because they are a master at gaining rapport, or they're like people who are like themselves, or who are like how they want to be. And so your job is to either create yourself into someone that people want to be like, or when you're meeting people, then be how they are, right? Be like they are. So people like people who are like they are, or who are like they want to be. And so that's the lesson on rapport. This one is one that is worth watching a couple times, because once you really understand it, this will change your life. So with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.